Welcome to Coffee with Kupke, a production of St. Paul Inside the Walls. Here on Coffee with Kupke, we grab a cup of coffee, at least we're claiming this is coffee. We sit with Monsignor Kupke, Raymond Kupke, the pastor of St. Anthony's in Hawthorne, professor at Immaculate Conception Seminary, diocesan archivist. We sit with Monsignor Kupke to delve into the history of Catholicism in the Diocese of Paterson. My name is Father Paul Manning. I am the vicar for Evangelization for the Diocese of Paterson. And here I am with Monsignor Kupke. So grab your cup of coffee and let's jump right in. I'm going to take a sip. So if I were going to entitle this first episode, I would entitle it Origins. And I'm going to explain why. We want to talk about a couple of things. We want to talk about our origins in the diocese, and we also want to talk about the origin of Catholicism in the three counties of our diocese. So here's how I'm going to open up the topic. Raymond, you know that I grew up in rural Ironia, part of Randolph Township, Morris County. That's Ironia, not Hibernia. And I feel like growing up in Ironia, being born in 1958, that I lived with 1 foot in 2 centuries, right? Ironia was still, in large measure, undeveloped. I had a grandmother who was born in the 19th century who lived right next door. I lived among a generation that would last until the 21st century. And even now I have great nieces and nephews who are going to live well into the 22nd century. So my experience of the diocese, at least in the first couple decades of my life, was the experience of growing up in 2 different centuries, in a sense. I'm just curious about your origins in the diocese and your take on the church at that time in your childhood.
It's funny you should mention that, because as a freshman at Morris Catholic High School in Denville in 1961, the girl who sat next to me in homeroom was from Ironia.
You're kidding me.
And I can remember saying to her, "Where are you from?" And she told me, and I had no earthly idea where Ironia was.
Well, is it fair to ask her name?
Pat Delane.
Delane?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was connected to St. Mary's in Dover. Went to grammar school there, but that's where her family was connected to. I know yours was with St. Lawrence in Chester.
Yeah, actually, initially, I think my oldest sister was baptized at St. Mary's in Dover, but then we moved to St. Lawrence. But you grew up where?
My family moved to Parsippany in 1957. And at that point, Parsippany was nothing like what you and I remember from ministry at St. Peter's. When I moved to Parsippany, my next door neighbors had 2 sons, and the older boy was in the last Parsippany class to be graduating from Booton High School.
Okay. Wow.
So It was a much different world then. I was a member of St. Christopher's, which at that point was still technically a mission of Notre Dame and Cedar Knolls.
Oh, my goodness. I can't imagine that. St. Christopher's as a mission parish.
Yeah.
And St. Peter's was there as well.
St. Peter's was the other side of Parsippany, right? The other side of Route 46.
So what about your take on the church in that era, right? Because I think in some ways, the first part of my life, the church was still in the 1950s, right? And then we had the church-changing, life-changing event, the Vatican II. So your take on the church at that time in our diocese?
It was very much a building church. It was an era when the diocese was growing rapidly and new parishes were being founded, and there was a lot of construction. So, it was very much a brick and mortar period, For example, Our fourth bishop, Bishop Nava, his first Sunday as bishop, they brought him out to Chester, and he blessed the new church and confirmed. They gave him lunch. Then they took him to Schooley's Mountain, and he blessed the new church and confirmed. Our bishops today have no experience like that.
Yeah. So Bishop Nava?
Bishop Nava.
Well, that would have been
1964.
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
got it. Well, I want to talk about the origins of Catholicism in our diocese. So I want to mention, I hope you know, that Monsignor Kupke is the author of this large tome called Living Stones, which is not just the history of the Diocese of Paterson, but the history of Catholicism in the region of the Diocese of Paterson. And Monsignor Kupke, why don't you tell us what occasioned the book?
I was called in by the bishop, and Bishop Rodimer.
Okay.
Bishop Rodimer, was a native of the diocese.
I believe he was a Rockowegian, was he not?
Rockowegian,
Yes,
right.
from Rockaway.
Right. His father was the postmaster in Rockaway.
I did not know that.
And so he had a lifelong connection with the diocese, and very much interested in history. And so he kind of suspected that I did for a variety of reasons. So he kind of said, "You're going to write a history for the 50th anniversary of the diocese." And he sent me away to Catholic University to get a master's degree in church history in preparation for that.
Okay.
So I kind of knew I had this
task ahead
of me, and he gave me the time to do it as well.
Yeah. Now, Bishop Rodimer's family was from the further west, right?
Right. He has relatives in Hibernia and also as far west as Branchville.
Okay. Hibernia, not Ironia.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would always joke about his own family because of his 8 great-grandparents, only one was Catholic. There's no way he should be a Catholic bishop of Paterson, but his mother's mother's mother was an Irish Catholic girl, and she held on to. Yep.
Yeah, we know how those Irish Catholics
exactly.
are. Yeah,
she won the day.
Yeah. Now, Raymond, you're going to be, sorry, Father Ray, you're going to be embarrassed by this question probably, but I remember decades ago asking you if you had a photographic memory. Do you remember me asking you that?
No, so that shoots the photographic memory part.
That's true. But I remember asking you this, and you responded. You don't remember how you responded, but do you have certainly a memory for historical facts? Yeah,
not always dates, but facts, yes. And
then you make them up if you don't. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But also, I've just always had a good memory for details. I can remember, small details that pull in a whole story from back when.
Well, when I asked you this decades ago, you responded saying, I don't exactly have a photographic memory, but I do see certain things on a page.
Yeah.
So you can recite by memory the parishes of our diocese, correct?
Annunciation, Wayne, Assumption, Morristown, Blessed Sacrament, Paterson, sure.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. And also some American historical figures. I don't know if you still do it, but with young people, you used to be able to recite president, vice president, secretary of state.
Yeah, I can do that, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much photographic in my mind. So
I'm good at lists.
Yeah, okay. Do you see the page?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. I try to remember my homilies that way, and it doesn't work so well. So I want to go to the first chapter, which begins in mid-1700s in the geographical region that is our diocese. And you entitle that chapter Quiet Awakening.
Yes.
Tell me why.
Well, there was a lot going on in the mid-1700s. This is when the United States is beginning to emerge, as a
on the
country.
global stage, in a
right,
sense,
were
yeah.
beginning to appear. And quietly in the midst of that, Catholicism was beginning to make an appearance, very tentatively at first, in northwestern New Jersey. We can date it really to about 1764, when several boatloads of German ironworkers came to work in a New Jersey iron mining company in what is today like Ringwood, West Milford, Vernon Township.
Yeah.
There was a nascent iron mining industry up there. So these people came from southwestern Germany, southwestern Germany, the Saarland region. And basically the iron mining industry was collapsing in their home region.
And
they came.
I should know, but is that part of Germany predominantly Catholic?
Yes, right.
Would that be the area where Pope Benedict came from? Or?
No, Benedict comes from Bavaria.
Okay, sorry, I knew that, but I don't know my German geography very well.
It's kind of interesting because those families have been here so long, 2.5 centuries now, that they had lost connection to where exactly they had come from. They knew they were German, and they knew when they came over, but the families had lost the actual connection about what part of Germany they had come from.
Now, which families are you talking about?
The families up in what is now St. Joseph's Parish in West Milford.
Oh, so you mean the current families had lost touch with us?
Yeah.
Got it.
But like 100 years ago, they had already lost connection. And there have been several, genealogical researchers within the families who have been hunting for this for years, trying to make the connection back to Europe. But we actually made the connection about 30 years ago, but in the opposite direction.
Somebody over there looking.
German researchers doing historical research on the collapse of the German iron mining industry.
Okay.
And they began to wonder where these people had ever gone. So somehow, one of the researchers was put in contact with my book.
Okay.
Because somebody else over there said, this guy wrote a church history, but there's a lot of material about 1700 miners.
Okay, so
he got a hold of the book and started reading the first chapter and realized that these are the names of the families that he was looking for.
Wow.
So he began matching back and forth and realized that this is his missing tribe of German iron workers.
So the collapse of the iron industry in Germany was around what time?
1760s, 1750s.
Okay, got it. And so this is amazing. I have never really thought about or heard of the German origins of Catholicism in our diocese. The Irish get a lot of credit, right?
Yes, they were there.
Okay,
and a few French.
Okay. So we're in 1764.
Right.
Catholicism is quietly awakening.
Right. And somehow they make contact with the closest priest, who is in Philadelphia, what is today Old St. Joseph's Church, which would be about 2 blocks behind Independence Hall in downtown Philly. So this is a parish staffed by ex-Jesuits. The Jesuits had just been suppressed.
Yes.
So,
if at some point we probably ought to figure out a way to let people ask questions, because that would be an interesting digression. But let's stay where we are.
Yeah. So the basically English Jesuits working in the Maryland colony had spread into Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Because William Penn, in getting his colonial charter, had a reference put in the charter of freedom of worship to all Christians. Most of the colonial charters excluded papists,
Okay.
us from
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But Penn was conscious of protecting his own group, the Quakers.
Okay.
So he got this more liberal charter. So the
Thank you,
Jesuit,
William Penn.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Jesuit priests in Maryland saw that and immediately
Moved in.
sent his own guy up to Philadelphia, which at that point was the largest city in the colonies, and I think it was actually the second largest city in the British Empire at that point, English-speaking city anyway.
Wow.
So, they established a church in Pennsylvania, and it's still there, Old St. Joseph's. The Jesuits still maintain it today. So somehow our Germans up in North Jersey, our iron miners, somehow connected to one of the priests in Philadelphia. There were two there, an English-speaking and a German-speaking.
And I think I know the name of one of them. I think this is what we're getting to, and it's a name that we should know, right? In American Catholic history, and certainly in New Jersey history. So
Ferdinand Farmer. The Jesuits in Maryland wrote to their superior in Rome to ask the German province to send over two guys because they were experiencing a German influx. What we would call today the Pennsylvania Dutch
okay,
are really Pennsylvania Deutsch, Pennsylvania Germans.
yeah.
We think of most of them as Anabaptists, the Lancaster, Pennsylvania Dutch, but some of them were Catholic.
I did not know this. Wow.
So they needed a German-speaking priest in Philadelphia. So the German province sends over two priests, and on the ship coming over, they decide to anglicize their names.
Okay. I was wondering because Farmer didn't sound German to me.
So Ferdinand Steinmeier decides to become Ferdinand Farmer.
Now, Steinmeier means...
Well, there is some indication that Farmer is actually a translation of Steinmeier. The Meyer of a Stein would be like the overseer of an estate.
Got it.
So
okay,
he'd be Farmer.
Okay.
So he winds up in Philadelphia. And
who was the other guy?
the other guy is Matthias Sittensperger, who becomes...
a reclining patty of meat.
something
Sorry,
like
that was bad. That was bad.
So he becomes Father Manners.
Manners. Oh. Any relation to Miss Manners?
No,
Okay.
none whatsoever.
Now, I want to mention at this point, your name is German. Yes.
It is, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is there any Catholic connection to this region that you're talking about? Or,
None.
Okay.
None whatsoever.
Okay.
No, these iron miners came from the Saarland region, which is southwestern Germany.
Okay.
We actually now know exactly which valley they came from, thanks to the researchers on the German side.
So I'm imagining you had conversations. You were the link in many ways.
Well, that my book was. They picked this up. They looked at my book, and I mentioned several of the families by name, and they quickly said, "We know those names."
Yeah.
And then they began matching it to Farmer's baptismal register, which has been published.
Okay.
So
can you paint this picture? We have these German Catholics. Does somebody travel down there to meet with him, or how does this happen?
they say that when you die, you get to ask God 3 questions.
Okay.
And this is one of my 3 questions.
Wow.
Who made the connection?
Yeah.
My suspicion is that there may have been relatives in West Milford that were related to Germans in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And that somehow that was the connection.
And so does Farmer decide he's got to exercise a mission? Or
Farmer is the most zealous evangelical character I've ever come across. He's like Francis Xavier.
wow.
He just had a natural bent to evangelization. So when he finds out about these people, he just gets on his horse and goes up there. And Farmer is he's an archivist's delight
Because
he kept perfect records.
yeah.
You know, his sacramental records, which are still extant today, they are perfectly legible, unlike some of our contemporaries.
Oh yeah.
You know, you look in some of our sacramental registers today and you can barely read the handwriting. But Farmer had perfect handwriting and provides all the information. So we know exactly where he went, on what days. You know, you can follow him on horseback from Philadelphia to North Jersey based on the places he mentions. You know, he came up the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River,
Got it.
crossed over at Phillipsburg.
Yep.
You know, we know this because he mentions it.
Yeah.
And then came basically up Route, I forget what it is, 517 or whatever, the one that goes through Changewater up to Hackettstown and then up into the iron mine country.
Now, would there? I guess there was a bridge at Phillipsburg. I mean,
Or ferry, probably.
yeah. Oh, a ferry. Yeah. How old was Farmer at this time?
Farmer would have been in his 40s at that point.
Let's leave it there. I want all of you who are listening or watching to make sure that you keep an eye out or an ear out for the next episode of Coffee with Kupke. In order to stay on top of new releases, make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you are on YouTube, please do drop a like and hit the bell for notifications. While you're at it, make sure to check out the other shows produced by the diocese. Those shows are Beyond the Beacon, hosted by Bishop Kevin Sweeney and Jay Agnish, our Director of Communications, and the Paul Street Journal, hosted by Brian Hansberger and Freddie Garcia. I want to give a special thanks to Joe Ginexi, our sound and visual engineer, Caitlin Ferrari, who's involved in pre and post-production, and Freddie Garcia, who's helping out with this podcast in addition to doing his own. With all that said, I just want to thank you for joining us in Coffee with Kupke. Keep making Catholic history in the Diocese of Paterson.